You're sitting there right now, completely unaware that in this exact moment, someone who matters just said your name. Not casually, not in passing. The kind of moment where everything stops, where the air gets heavy, where people lean in because they know what's coming next. They went straight to your abuser, the one who shattered you, abandoned you, rewrote your reality, tried to make you disappear. And they asked the one question your abuser never prepared for. Simple, direct, impossible to dodge. Do you know what you did? And here's the part that will break them. Your abuser has no clue yet. They think they're untouchable. They think you faded into nothing like everyone else they destroyed. They think your name is buried somewhere in their past, forgotten, erased, irrelevant. But someone sees now. Someone with real authority. Someone who doesn't speak unless they already hold all the cards. And they're moving. Let me show you what's unfolding right now. While you're reading this, in a space you'll never witness, there's a conversation happening that your abuser never saw coming. Their name came up. Their history got pulled like evidence in a trial they didn't know existed. And the person driving this conversation, they aren't curious. They already did the work. They already traced the patterns. They already know your story. Now they want to see if your abuser understands, if they grasp what kind of reckoning is headed straight for them. Because ignorance isn't protection anymore. It's just proof of how blind they've been. Your abuser believed they were immune, didn't they? They believed their status, their network, their ability to twist truth would shield them forever. They believed nobody would dig deep enough. Nobody would care enough. Nobody would ever connect the dots. But someone did. Someone looked past the performance, past the polished exterior, past the rehearsed explanations, and they saw you. They saw what happened. They saw the wreckage, the trail of broken souls left behind. And they asked the question your abuser spent years avoiding. Do you know what you did? And the response that's coming, it's going to dismantle everything they constructed on deception. You know what makes this perfect? You didn't have to fight for this. You didn't have to demand justice or beg for validation or chase revenge. You simply survived. You healed quietly. You rebuilt yourself when everyone looked away. You walked forward with grace while they kept destroying, believing they were invincible. And now the universe sent someone with genuine power to ask the question you stopped asking long ago because you already knew the truth. But they're about to learn the hard way what happens when you dismiss someone who transformed their wounds into strength. Someone who became indestructible while they were busy breaking others. Let me show you what's really happening beneath the surface. Because this isn't just one question. This is about a network, a structure, a web of people who believed they could function in shadows indefinitely. Your abuser never operated alone. They never do. There were enablers, silent observers, people who witnessed everything and said nothing, people who gained from your destruction, people who smiled at your face while plotting your downfall. And for years, this system worked flawlessly. Everyone performed their part. Everyone stayed silent. Everyone shielded each other because that's what predators do. They create ecosystems built on silence. But something changed. Someone at the top, someone outside that ecosystem, they started questioning. And when authority figures start questioning, everything underneath begins fracturing. Here's what your abuser doesn't grasp yet. Power isn't about positions or volume or how much space you take in a room. True power is about knowing what others think stays hidden, about asking questions that dismantle the architecture of lies people built their existence on. And the person asking about you now, they hold that kind of power. They're not some passive observer. They're not someone your abuser can charm or control or silence. They're someone who sees through masks, someone who prioritizes truth over comfort, someone who refuses to protect reputations built on ruin. And they ask the question, Do you know what you did? Not as an attack, not yet, but as a test, a trap, because they already possess the answer. They want to observe if your abuser will lie, if they'll minimize, if they'll pretend ignorance. And every single word your abuser speaks from this point forward is being documented, assessed, gathered as evidence for what's next. You want to understand why this matters so deeply, because your abuser's entire reality rests on other people's silence. They escaped consequences because their victims stayed quiet, because culture told you to forget, to forgive, to avoid conflict, to rise above while they continued destroying lives without penalty. But silence only functions when everyone participates. And now someone shattered that code. Someone with position, with influence, with the capacity to create real change, asked the question openly. And once that question gets asked in spaces that carry weight, once powerful people start examining what happened to you, the silence dies. The protection vanishes, and your abuser stands exposed on a stage they never knew existed, with lights illuminating every shadow they tried to conceal. Here's the part that will consume them. They won't know who asked. They won't know who possesses information. They won't know how deep this goes or what evidence exists. They'll start questioning everything, every interaction, every record, every person who knows their truth. Because paranoia is the cost of exposure when you believed you were invisible. They'll spend nights wondering if you spoke up, wondering if others came forward, wondering if their entire empire of manipulation is crumbling because one person decided to ask one question. And the reality will be worse than anything they imagined, because they hurt someone who survived, someone who became living proof of their cruelty just by continuing to exist and flourish despite everything they did. You know what the most devastating part is? Your abuser still doesn't know. They still believe they're protected. They still believe their past is sealed away. They still move through life with confidence, with arrogance, with that sickening entitlement that comes from never facing justice. They hurt you and moved forward. They probably don't even remember you now. You're just another casualty in a long history of people they crushed to climb higher. And that ignorance, that careless cruelty, that's what makes this moment so beautiful. Because they have zero awareness that someone is watching now. Someone who holds weight. Someone who can collapse their world with one conversation. And they're about to discover that forgetting you was their greatest mistake. Let me show you what unfolds when someone at the top starts questioning. First, confusion spreads. People panic. They scramble to understand why this matters. Why now? Why you? Your abuser will probably dismiss it initially. They'll downplay. They'll use phrases like, "It was years ago. Circumstances were complex. You're overreacting." They'll attempt to control perception the way they always have. But here's the truth. The person asking isn't seeking explanations. They're asking because they already possess facts. They know what occurred. They know how you were treated. They know the lies your abuser spread. And now they want to see if your abuser has the integrity to speak truth, or if they'll keep lying, keep minimizing, keep performing innocence. Because every deception they tell now adds weight to the judgment that's building. Your abuser believed they could manipulate reality. They believed if they told their version loud enough, repeatedly enough, people would accept it. And temporarily, it worked. People believed them. People aligned with them. People looked at you like you were the issue. And you carried that shame, didn't you? You questioned yourself. You wondered if maybe you were too fragile, too emotional, too damaged to be trusted. But somewhere deep, you knew reality. You knew what they did. You knew how they distorted truth. And you held on to that knowing even when nobody else would. Even when it felt like the entire world was gaslighting you into silence, you held it. And now someone else sees it too. someone who has the authority to act, someone who isn't intimidated by your abuser's reputation or connections or carefully constructed image. Here's what your abuser doesn't understand about people like you. You don't need revenge. You don't need vindication. You don't need them to apologize or admit what they did, because you already healed. You already moved forward. You already built a life they can never damage. But justice isn't about you needing it. Justice is about the universe correcting itself. It's about consequences finally reaching people who thought they were exempt. And that question, do you know what you did? It's not being asked for your sake. It's being asked because someone at the top realized that people like your abuser don't just hurt one person. They hurt everyone they encounter. They leave destruction everywhere. And eventually, someone has to stop them. And that someone just asked the first question, and your abuser has no idea what follows. Let me take you deeper into what's approaching. Because this isn't just about one conversation. This is about the collapse of an entire false reality. Your abuser built their life on carefully constructed deception. They built a reputation. They built relationships. They built achievement. All of it standing on a foundation of people they destroyed along the way. And foundations like that don't collapse instantly. They crack slowly, quietly, one question at a time, one investigation at a time, one person at a time realizing they were deceived. And right now, the first crack just formed. Someone at the top asked the question. And now others are going to start questioning too. People who trusted your abuser, people who defended them, people who looked away because it was simpler than facing truth. They're all about to have an extremely uncomfortable awakening. You know what happens when one person with authority starts questioning someone's character. Everyone else starts noticing. People who ignored warnings, people who dismissed victims, people who participated in the cover-up, whether consciously or not, they all start reconsidering. They start remembering details, small things, moments that felt wrong at the time, comments that seemed strange, behavior that triggered alarms but they couldn't quite name. And suddenly all those fragments start forming a pattern, an image, a truth they can no longer reject. And your abuser is going to witness in real time as people who once supported them start withdrawing, start questioning, start creating distance because nobody wants association with someone about to be exposed. Nobody wants to be the person who defended a predator. Here's the beautiful irony. Your abuser probably spent years telling people that you were the problem, that you were unstable, dramatic, vengeful. They probably painted themselves as the victim of your chaos. And people believed them because your abuser excels at performing innocence. They know how to manufacture tears, how to manipulate sympathy, how to appear reasonable while making you look unstable. But now someone with power is examining the situation with clear vision, and they're seeing what you saw all along. They're seeing the manipulation, the gaslighting, the cruelty disguised as concern. And they're asking the question your abuser never wanted anyone to ask. Do you know what you did? Because if they truly knew, if they genuinely understood, they wouldn't be able to maintain the performance. They wouldn't be able to face people and pretend innocence. Let me show you what your abuser is about to lose. First, they lose the narrative. They lose the ability to control perception. Because once someone at the top questions their character, everyone else starts questioning too. Second, they lose protection. All those people who enabled them, who covered for them, who looked away, they're going to start protecting themselves instead. Nobody drowns with a sinking ship when they can escape. Third, they lose credibility. Everything they built, every relationship, every achievement, every moment of respect they received, It all gets re-examined through the lens of what they did to you and everyone else they hurt. And fourth, they lose peace. Because once you know someone is investigating you, once you know your past is being scrutinized, you can never rest again. Every call could be the one. Every meeting could be the confrontation. Every day could be when everything collapses. And that psychological warfare, that constant dread, that's the beginning of justice. Now we enter the phase your abuser feared but never truly believed would arrive. The reckoning. Because asking the question, "Do you know what you did?" is just the beginning. That question is the spark. What comes next is the blaze. And your abuser is standing in a structure made of lies, drenched in gasoline, wondering why it suddenly feels so dangerous. They're about to learn something fundamental about how reality works. You can evade consequences temporarily. You can hide. You can manipulate perception. You can silence victims. But eventually someone asks the right question. And once that question is asked, everything you buried starts rising to the surface. And there's no preventing it. There's no damage control. There's no spinning the story. There's only the truth, raw, brutal, undeniable, coming for everything you built on the backs of broken people. Here's what your abuser doesn't understand about powerful people who ask questions. They don't ask unless they already have answers. They don't investigate unless they already suspect. They don't mention your name unless they already know your story matters. So when someone at the top asked, "Do you know what you did?" they weren't seeking information. They were testing character. They were creating an opportunity for your abuser to speak truth, to take responsibility, to show even a trace of remorse. And your abuser, being exactly who they are, probably failed that test spectacularly. They probably lied, probably minimized, probably blamed you, probably played victim. And every single word they spoke in response to that question was recorded, remembered, added to a growing file of evidence that they are exactly what you always knew they were. A predator, a manipulator, someone who hurts people and feels nothing. You want to know why this moment carries such power? Because for years, you carried the weight of what happened alone. You tried to tell people and they didn't believe you. You tried to get help and you were dismissed. You tried to move forward and the trauma followed you like darkness. And through all of that, your abuser lived freely. They moved through the world unburdened. They built success on your suffering. They smiled publicly while you cried privately. They thrived while you barely survived. And nobody stopped them. Nobody questioned them. Nobody asked them to explain. Until now. Now someone with real authority, with genuine power, with the ability to create consequences, asked the question. And your abuser's response, whatever it was, is about to determine the rest of their life. Because people at the top don't forget. They don't release things. When they ask a question and dislike the answer, they act. And action from people with power is the only thing people like your abuser actually fear. Here's what comes next. And you need to understand this because it's already moving. Once someone at the top starts questioning someone's character, other people start emerging. People who were too terrified before. People who thought they were alone. People who assumed nobody would believe them. They hear that someone is asking questions, and they find courage. They share their stories. They add their voices to yours. And suddenly your abuser isn't dealing with one victim they can discredit. They're dealing with a pattern, a history, multiple people describing the same behaviors, exposing the same tactics. And patterns are impossible to deny. Patterns are evidence. Patterns are proof. And your abuser is about to be buried under the weight of every person they thought they silenced, every victim they thought they erased, every life they thought didn't matter. They all matter now because someone at the top asked the question, and now everyone is answering. Let me show you the loneliest moment in a predator's life. It's not when they're caught. It's not when they're confronted. It's the moment they realize nobody is coming to save them. The moment they look around and see that all the people who used to protect them are gone. All the enablers, all the defenders, all the people who looked away, they're all suddenly very occupied, suddenly very silent, suddenly very concerned with protecting their own reputations. And your abuser is about to experience that isolation in ways they never imagined. Because when someone at the top asks questions about you, everyone beneath them starts calculating. They start asking themselves, is defending this person worth risking my own position, my own reputation, my own future? And the answer is always no. Always. Nobody sacrifices themselves for someone about to be exposed. Nobody goes down defending someone whose crimes are surfacing. Your abuser thought they had allies. They thought they had people who would stand beside them regardless. But those were never allies. Those were accomplices. People who benefited from the same system of silence and manipulation. People who needed your abuser to be innocent. Because if your abuser is guilty, then they're complicit.